afternoon, everyone. Today we'll be discussing Lecture 8. In this chapter, we're going to introduce the Malthusian model, which explains the relationship between population growth and income per capita, and how economies have transitioned from a steady state or a stagnant state of growth to sustained growth, which is what we find in most developed economies. So along the balanced growth path, technology and income per capita grows at the rate of the population growth. In Romer's model in chapter 5, the number of ideas are related to the number of people, and as such, incomes per capita should increase with the size of population. But Thomas Malthus believed that the human race was doomed because any increases in population, given a fixed supply of natural resources, would lead to declining living standards or decreases in your incomes per capita. He did not take into account the potential benefit of innovation that would come through ideas that comes from the population. So in this chapter, we are going to build endogenous population growth into the model. Remember, in all our previous models, population has been exogenous. And we'll also include fixed resources so that we can allow for this Malthusian dynamics. And we'll also see how economies have transitioned from low incomes to high incomes over time. We can break up the history of human population growth, income per capita, and education into three eras, following the work of Gallo and Weil. In figure 8.1, we can see that population and income per capita only started increasing about 200 years ago. Prior to that, humans were hunters and gatherers until they settled into agriculture about 10,000 years ago. This is the first era, the Malthusian era. And in this era, in the Malthusian era, income was low and barely growing. Population was also low and barely growing. And there was no human capital accumulation, i.e., there was no education. No one was investing in education during that era. The second era is the post-Malthusian era. In this era, which is around 1800 CE, income per capita and population started growing. More children were being born, and these children were also surviving into adulthood. And this characterized this particular era with high fertility rates and low child mortality rates. However, we still find that in this era, the human capital accumulation remained low. So again, investments in education were still low. The main feature, however, that distinguishes this era from the Malthusian era is that increases in the population growth rates were no longer leading to declining incomes per capita. Income per capita continued to rise. The third era is the modern growth era. This era captures the developed world as it is today, and those countries as well that are growing quick enough to converge towards the leaders. In this era, there are two main features. One, the demographic transition, and this is when you move from high to low fertility rates, led to declining population growth rates. And two, increases in human capital accumulation. So now you find that in this era, countries are starting to invest in education, and incomes as well, incomes per capita, continue to rise. So in order to describe the economics that we've just explained in the previous slides in the Malthusian era, we developed the following model with this production function. This is your output, where Y is your output. X is the stock of land, so that will be your fixed resource. L is your population, and B is technology. And this model displays constant returns to scale. As we have done with all our previous models, we have to put it into per capita terms. So we divide by population. And what we find is that output per worker decreases with population growth rate. And remember, your model has decreasing returns to scale because of that fixed resource. As population increases, fixed supply of land diminishes, so output for everyone declines. The Malthusian model makes population growth endogenous by assuming that population growth increases with income per capita. For example, at very low levels of income, food is scarce and nutrition is poor. As such, having babies is difficult, and those families that are able to conceive may lose those children due to hunger, poor health. So infant mortality is high. However, as your income continues to rise, families have more food to go around, they're healthier, and they can have more babies that survive longer, so your population increases. And this is represented by the equation for population growth, where C is your subsistence level of consumption, and theta is a parameter governing the response of population to income. So in other words, if Y, your output here, is small, then your incomes are low, and it is possible that your incomes can be so small that it is below, that this is lower than your subsistence level, and families are not able to have enough surviving children to replace the parents, such that population growth rate becomes negative. So it is possible to have negative growth rates if your incomes are lower than what you are consuming. So we can substitute the production function. If I can just quickly show you this function, you substitute this function into this little y in your population growth equation. And what we find is that population growth is negatively related with the size of population itself. And this is highlighted in figure 8.2. At low levels of population, people are relatively rich. That is, your incomes are high, and population growth is above zero. So your population growth is positive. At higher levels of population, your income starts to decline and your population growth becomes negative or decreases. What we also get from this graph is the equilibrium state in the model where level of population is equal to L star. And at this point, your population growth rate is zero. It is neither increasing or decreasing. And at L star, your population size can be sustained indefinitely by the economy. This is called the Malthusian steady state, or you'll be in a Malthusian stagnation. Because what's happening is that when incomes increase, population increases. When population increases, there's not enough income to go around. It starts coming, your income starts coming down and population starts decreasing. So basically they're offsetting each other and you remain in this steady state. We can also represent the steady state mathematically, of course. And in steady state, your population growth rate is equal to 0. And you can solve for L. The equation tells us that in steady state, the size of population is proportional to the amount of land. More land can support higher population, and it's positively related to technology. More technology can support more people on the same area of land, because as we already know from previous models, technology makes available resources more productive. And your population size is negatively related to subsistence requirement. The greater the subsistence requirement, the greater your consumption, the smaller the size of population. We now look at transitions when there's a shift in technology. So in figure 8.3, it shows that people become more productive because of increases in technology. So your population growth curve shifts to the right because you have an increase in your population size. So an increase in technology leads to an increase in income per capita and subsequently an increase in population growth rate to A initially. So your income, you have an increase in income per capita, your population growth increases to A. This increase in population growth rate allows the size, remember L, the size of your population to grow to a larger steady state at L2. But this increase at A in population growth, it's only temporary, because as your population rises, as your population size rises, incomes will start to decline. You have more mouths to feed, and there's not enough to go around anymore. So your population growth will start to decline until it gets back to equilibrium. And the economy is back in equilibrium, but at a new steady state. So technology increases, so a technology increase, leads to temporary gains in income, but permanent gains in population size. But what will happen if we have a continuous technological change? Well, the population growth curve will continue shifting to the right. So you will have a continuous shift to the right. And we can show this in the production function by taking the logs and derivatives. X is a fixed resource, therefore constant, and it becomes 0 and it will fall away, which is why you don't see any X in your equation, because that's a fixed resource. And when you take a derivative of a constant, it becomes 0. We can see that income per capita grows at the rate of technology. And this is shown in figure 8.4. So the intuition of this equation is that if population growth is less than G is your technological growth along the balanced growth path. If population growth is less than the rate of technology, income is rising until it gets to your Malthusian steady state. I'll repeat that. If your population growth, so here's your population growth rate in the graph, and this is your income per capita, and this is your balanced growth path where technology is growing at a constant rate. So if population growth is below technology, your income will rise until it gets to the Malthusian steady state. If your population growth is greater than technology, so here, if you're greater than technology, then income is going to decline until you get to your Malthusian steady state. If the rate of technology increases, if this G increases, you can get an instant where you get a shock to the economy, technology increases, then that horizontal line will move up and you'll have a new steady state. But what is it that determines this rate of technology? Remember in chapter 5, technological progress can be modeled as the equation where it increases with the size of population in the research sector. I hope this equation is still familiar. You'll find it in chapter 5. If we assume that lambda is 1 and phi is 1, we will end up with this equation, this population growth equation. And what that is telling us is that there's a virtuous cycle or a continuous cycle where increases in technology generate higher population growth, which generates higher technology. And when your population growth increases, it will increase with the population size. This is in contrast to Malthusian model, where an increase in population size is associated with lower income per capita and hence lower population growth rates. Only when we introduce continuous technological change do we find that as population size increases, technology grows faster. So we have more innovation and ideas. As technology grows faster, the population grows faster. This model can then explain the dynamics in chapter 8.5, where we have a positive relationship between population growth rate and population size, instead of the Malthusian dynamics where the population growth is negatively related to the population size. So how do we transition then from the Malthusian stagnation to sustained growth? Well, we need to have continuous increase in population and technology, and this will sustain rising incomes per capita. Figure 8.6 shows dynamics of income per capita. So at very low levels of income per capita, with population growth lower than your technology. So here we've got our technology growing along the balanced growth path at a constant rate. And if our income is below the technology rate, there is a positive relationship between population growth and income. Why? Because technology is growing faster than population is eating away at the resources. However, a shock to the economy, which can increase income per capita significantly enough to push it to this steady state at YT. But this is not a stable steady state, nor is it realistic or in line with data. A more realistic transition to sustained economic growth can be seen in figure 8.7. As population size increases, we have more ideas, because remember, innovation comes from your population. So as your population size increases, our technology is going to increase in the economy and shift up. And this can continue till the rate of technological growth is continuously growing faster than the rate of population growth, such that the economy is able to sustain rising incomes per capita. And in this situation, we then have sustained growth, which is what we find in most developed economies today. So while increases in technological progress have determined transition to sustained growth, the role of fixed resources have also contributed to these transitions. Recall that technological growth is a function of increases in technology in relation to your fixed resource. The larger the beta, more land matters for production, the smaller the technological progress. So what you find is you have a delay in the transition because of lower technological change. There is a drag in transitioning caused by the fixed factor. The faster an economy adopts technology, the faster it will transition out of the Malthusian steady state. However, over time, the importance of land has started to decline, and this can be seen in figure 8.8. The land share drops significantly from the 1600s to the current period. Especially during the Industrial Revolution, you can see there's a significant drop in the share of land in England. And this is the era when technology was adopted and the economy started to grow faster than the population growth, which led them to the sustained growth. Finally, why does population growth initially increase and then decrease with income? Is there a quantity-quality trade-off? This is an economic description of family decisions regarding the number of children and the education they receive. In order to find out if we are facing a quantity-quality trade-off, we use a family's utility maximizing function subject to the budget constraint of this family. The budget is made up of your subsistence, the C, subsistence consumption. M is the amount spent on the number of on children, and E is the amount spent on educating your children. We use the following equation to translate spending on children and education into M, the little m, which is the number of children, and U, which is the units of education. The utility function is then made up of the number of kids the parents have and how much they spend on the education for each child. The first order condition with respect to E shows us the amount spent on educating children. The intuition of this equation is that families increase spending on education as income increases. When income is low, any increase in income initially leads to having more children. But as income continues to rise, demand for kids decreases and spending on education increases. The last two slides you can self-read. They're just telling you that you can apply the quantity quality model to observed patterns of income and population growth across the world, and various hypotheses why Europe took the lead in sustained growth. Thank you.